Hey everybody, Dan from Men Need to Be Heard here. This upcoming podcast, I just wanted to let you know ahead of time. We had a little sound issues here and there, and there's also some stops and starts. And the reason for that is my guest, Randy Seale, who is a member of the Taylor House, which is a domestic violence shelter for men, has to take phone calls because he's actively there. So there are times when we stop the recording to allow him to focus on the victims, which is absolutely where that focus should be. So you'll see some stops and starts, but I really think you'll find this particular show very informative. Whether you're a man or woman is irrelevant, and whether you're a victim of domestic violence or not is irrelevant. There's powerful information in here. So join us. Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. I'm Dan, your host, and today we're going to be taking on a pretty serious topic. If you've been a regular follower of this podcast or follow me on any of the social medias, you know that one of my passions is helping male victims of domestic violence. I've talked about it in the past. I am a former victim. I am also a former peer counselor, ran a support group for men for about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, way back when in the early 20s. Some of you probably aren't old enough to have been around back then, but I am. And it is a passion of mine. It's something I talk about a lot, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. But what I wanted to do is really kind of show men that there is help out there and bring on some experts. So for those that don't know, male victims of domestic violence, the statistics, nailing it down is tough, but the most recent ones I've seen, they'll say roughly 1 in 4 men has been a victim. But if you actually look back, going back into the, I think it's late 70s and early 80s, the initial research done by Murray Strauss and Richard Gellis showed that male victims were pretty much on par with female victims. Unfortunately, things being what they were at that time, and I do remember it, that kind of got brushed aside. But I'm happy to say things have changed. So over the last really 20 years, I've seen significant change, and that's why I wanted to bring on my guest. My guest, let me bring his perfect face on here because he's a member of the Bald Brotherhood, just like me, is Reverend Randy Seale. There you go. And Randy is with the Taylor House with the Family Violence Prevention Center in Batesville, Arkansas. Did I say that right, Randy?
That is correct. Batesville, Arkansas is where family violence prevention is located, yes, sir. Which is in kind of the northeast part of the state.
Okay. So we're having a little bit of internet connection here and there. It'll pop up, but you can still hear me, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll keep going. All right, Randy, how about you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Well, of course, you said my name is Reverend Randy Seale. I'm a pastor within the United Methodist Church. I'm a licensed local pastor. It's just a couple of different levels of ordination and licensure and whatnot in that. And you're not here to hear about all of that. But I am serving a church here in Northeast Arkansas, and as a pastor and doing that. And also as part of my ministry too is helping to serve here family violence prevention, and specifically the Taylor House as well, which is dedicated solely to men who are victims of domestic violence, as you said, and we're one of only two. And that's important to note, is that, yes, there are only 2 shelters within the entirety of our nation in the United States of America that is dedicated to men who are victims of domestic violence. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with, the stigma of this and men being attacked by women. And it's not just that, and I think you hit the nail on the head too, when you talk about your opening is everything that women go through in this, men go through as well. It's not exclusive just to women as well. So the men also experience pretty much everything that a woman in domestic violence would as well. And I was just talking to somebody just yesterday about this and told them that as well. And their response was, wow,
yeah,
really?
Yeah.
So we don't being attacked or, gaslighted, attacked. verbally abused, physically abused. I mean, stabbed, shot. I mean, all of those things, and fleeing for their lives. And that's why we're here, because there is a need. And you know what? I was on the phone with one of our resources this morning, and a resource is we have dozens of shelters throughout North Texas who say, let me say that again, who say that they help men, but 9 times out of 10, almost 9.5, almost 10 times out of 10, they're only dealing with women. And so we get a lot of calls from that resource, which is Families to Freedom. Great resource that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's interesting you bring that point up because, as I said, I ran a peer group. Well, a couple points you made back in the day, and one of the things the guys really struggled with, they would come into the group, and what I always told them is, hey, first meeting, just sit and listen, kind of hear what we're saying. And when you're comfortable to open up, feel free. But one of the takeaways we almost always heard from them is, one, they were shocked to understand they weren't the only one. And I'm sure you've run into that, going through what they went through. But two, that their feelings are very much on par with what women go through. The same experience. It really isn't a gender issue, I don't feel. Nor should it be, or should it have been for the last 50 odd years. And then the other side of it that you mentioned too, most shelters will tell you they'll help men. And I've talked about this extensively before. The one that I was kind of affiliated with, because I couldn't be affiliated directly with them because, there are no male victims is what we were told back then. Now, mind you, this is 20, 25 years ago. But they would, in an extreme case, if they were going to help a man, they would funnel him to me generally to do the peer group. But the only help they gave him as far as, a bed, so to speak, was to give him a 3-day voucher to a local motel. And that motel just happened to be the same one the pedophiles were put in when they came out of jail. So I've talked about that extensively. I don't want to belabor on that point, but one of the things, Randy, I wanted to ask you as an advocate is, one of the things that is out there, and you kind of touched on it yourself, is there's so much misinformation about male victims. And the statistics are all over the place. You see someone that'll say that it's much higher than it's reported. Others will say it's actually very low. I've done extensive research and written about it. But what's your viewpoint about the information that's out there versus reality?
And I would say that the 1 in 4 male victims that you mentioned in your opening is what's probably reported. Mm-hmm. And even with victims and sexual assaults and things of that nature, there's only a certain percentage that's really reported in that. 1 in 4, about 25% of all domestic violence cases are inclusive of men. So that's about 25% there. So the 1 in 4, I think, is accurate as far as what is reported, what is advocated for, what is held. But I really think that because of the stigma that's out there on especially men with domestic violence issues, it's a lot more out there than we really want to admit or want to realize out there. I mean, we get calls every single day from guys who are in, they're in situations where, and we're not just talking about simple arguments here. We're talking about, people who are physically men who are physically beaten up by their spouses, by their girlfriends. The 1 in 4 statistic is statistic in that those are the ones that are reported. With any kind of statistics, of course, the folks out there, yes, there are more, there's not, and things like that. I just think that there are more that go along that are not reported because of the stigma with men in domestic violence issues. I want to tell a story real quick. When I was in college, I was in a fraternity, and one of my fraternity brothers, who was a little older than us, he came back. He was a medical student. He was coming back to finish up his bachelor's and then pick up a master's degree there at Henderson State in South Arkansas, where I went to school. And come in one day at the house, and he was so excited and happy, and what's going on? And he said, "Well, I won my case against my ex-wife." Well, divorce settlement, things like that. He said, "No, a domestic violence case." And I said, "What do you mean, a domestic violence case?" And I'm 19 years old at this time, and he's probably about 30-ish, 32 or so, and whatnot. And it was unfathomable to me to understand that women also abuse in relationships in the way that in the manner that he was getting beat up on a regular basis, 2 or 3 times a week. They'd get into arguments, and she would just, what he would say, go ballistic. And he finally started, documenting things and having proof, and had a case against her, and won that. And just, it's unheard of. And it, to me, in 2023, it's still the stigma that's attached to men who are victims of domestic violence. And it's not just the LGBT community. It runs the gamut, cisgendered men, the LGBT men, it is not exclusive to any one person, any one section of society or lifestyle or identity at all. This really affects everybody, Dan. And I think that, and I appreciate what you're doing, because you're actually helping to get the word out there that, hey, this is going on. These men do need help, and there are places out there that can help you. And I appreciate what you're doing so, so much.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I will let you know that my case shows up nowhere in the statistics. When it was going on for me. Now, mind you, this was in the early 90s, so it's been a while. But like, the police showed up a couple times, but one time in particular, my neighbors actually called. She had knocked me out. Police showed up. They were going to arrest me because, they were trained. The male's always the perpetrator. The neighbors stepped in and go, no, you got it completely wrong. But the police would not take a police report. They basically said to me, get out, go leave, go somewhere. They wouldn't do anything. This was 1994. Even prior to some of the training that came out, and I want to touch on the Duluth model a little bit, but this was even prior to all of that, really. And like, the one officer just looked me in the eye. He goes, "There's nothing we can do for you. Leave. Go stay at a hotel or something like that." I'm paraphrasing that part of it, but it's changed, I think, a little bit, but it's still out there, right? The stigma and the training is still out there. So can you talk a little bit about that?
It is. We get a lot of phone calls on our hotline, and I'll share that information with you here in just a bit, because we are a resource to help for those men. But we get a lot of calls just exactly like that situation that you just described. Hey, the cops were called. They told me I have to leave. Even though that the deed or the lease or whatever, it's in my name, but they're telling me I have to get out for the safety of her, and sometimes kids are involved as well too. And these relationships with their kids, with my kids, with her kids, it's kind of a yours, mine, ours kind of situation from time to time as well. And they just simply tell the man, yeah, you got to go. You have to find somewhere to go. I don't know if that's still the mentality of, the women and children first. And I appreciate that too. But a lot of times you have to have a third party. And it's sad that, those who are in authority don't necessarily take your word for what's happening in that moment. You're lucky you had to have that neighbor was there.
Oh, I would have been in jail otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, you would have, and at least some of the training now has, the police and other folks will come in and go, well, do you have a place to go? You have a place where you can go cool off, because they really don't want to take you to jail, especially after COVID and crowding and all that too. They seem to kind of take a hold more so of the training and try to find help for you to go somewhere and just cool off for a moment. And that's one of the starting places is, hey, if an argument, if these things are getting so volatile and whatnot, you need to find a safe place. That's the first thing you need to do. Man, woman, anybody, find a safe place to go. Now, what is that? Well, if there is a shelter in your area, find that shelter and get there. If there's a gas station in a well-lit spot, it's open 24/7. They don't mind you coming there. Go there and be safe. Go to a hospital. Go somewhere. Go to the police station too. Just anywhere that you feel like you can be safe. That's where you need to go. That's one of the things in our training that they tell us when we take calls on our hotline is, are you safe? Right now, currently, are you safe? Are you in any danger whatsoever? If you are, you need to hang up with me and call 911, and you need to get some authority that are in and around there. And if I need to be an advocate on the phone, I can call, their dispatch. I can call I can't dial into their 911 because sometimes, we're talking people are in Dallas or Atlanta or other places up north, where you are and all that. So, I can't directly dial into 911, but you tell me what city you're in. I can find their police dispatch and say, hey, you're going to get a phone call from this guy. He's in a domestic violence situation, and I can advocate that way as well too. So that's one of the things folks don't understand is that as an advocate, we can do those things for you and kind of help break down that wall immediately in there. But you have to know who to call first and who to reach out to, and if you're not privy to those kinds of things, and a lot of times it's hard. If I know we all got, well, I say we all do, but a lot of times we're attached to this smartphone thing. If you have an opportunity to have a smartphone and can look something up real quick, that's a great resource too. But first and foremost, get safe, and then look up those resources. But we want you to be in that safe situation. Now, granted, there may be a time where your neighbor had to come in like yours did. You're knocked out, right? You're unconscious.
I was unconscious. They called. Police showed up. I regained consciousness in the meantime, but the police showed up and did their thing. And I'm not faulting the police, by the way. They were doing the best they could. I have family members that are police officers. They hate domestic cases, they call them, because it is he said, she said. They don't know the real story, and their goal is to de-escalate the situation. But at that time, it was a little different. Sounds like it's changed.
That's what they know how to do, is to get who they might think the aggressor is out of the picture first, and they're automatically going to think it's the guy.
Yep.
And even today, they're automatically, and I'm a bigger person. I'm 300 pounds plus. I'm 6'3". And people automatically size. I'm going to be an aggressive person, and that's not always the case in situations. But I want to talk about too. It's very important, and I know here in this society and this season, we don't necessarily like to go out and be very neighborly, as much as we used to, when we were younger. But it's a good idea to go and befriend your neighbors, or at least have some sort of a relationship with the people that are around you, in case you find yourself in a situation like you're talking about, that you do have somebody who can advocate for you, and you immediately like that. Again, with the recent things that have been in the news, I would be very careful about talking to my neighbors, especially if they don't know you and you're new in an area too. But it's a good idea to try to get to know those persons who are around you, and those persons who might be able to help you if you ever find yourself in that situation.
And they can also be a refuge in a real emergency. Like if you have to get out, and that's something that I learned, if I was in the point where, okay, it's starting to escalate, and I would run next door, at least it got me out of the immediate physical danger. And I love your point there with, getting to know a neighbor or two. It doesn't have to be everybody, although not a bad idea. But getting that one or two people that you can go to in an emergency and that will help you is important. A couple other things that I would just mention for safe places. Firehouses is another good one. And churches often. Where I held my group was in a church. So we had a room that they let us use.
You can find a church that's open, or get in touch with the pastor or somebody, a layperson who is in that church, or just give them a call. Churches are, they come sanctuaries for a reason, right?
Exactly.
So you can get in those places, and then once you're safe, then you can start looking for those resources, whether locally or extended resources like we are for some places too. Like the Taylor House, and we have a women's domestic violence shelter here too called Safe Haven as well. So we serve both men and women. But again, as I mentioned before, there are places out there that may say that they help out men, but they're just saying that because they can't tell. If they're federally funded, especially, they can't tell you that, no, well, we don't help men either. But if those local resources aren't there, you can always call the Taylor House hotline. Would you like for me to go ahead and give that number now?
I was going to say, would you give people the way to contact that if they need? Yes, please do.
Absolutely. Our hotline number is 870-569-8024. That's 870-569-8024. Directly to the Taylor House. Now, if you need a toll-free number, we have one of those as well. You might get Safe Haven because it kind of rolls over in that tip, but they can actually get you in touch with us there as well. 800-894-8821. That's 800-894-8821. That's our toll-free hotline number as well. It's manned 24/7, 365, 366 on leap year. There's always somebody there. We'll always pick up within the first 3 rings as well. So if it gets to that second ring and you're getting a little bit more anxious, hey, just wait one more. We will be there and pick it up. We also take care of other folks that are in our shelters as well as hotline operators too. So we're kind of pulling some double duty at times.
And I will share all that information in the show notes. So if and I'll also put it up on the screen in post-production. But if you need that help, go down into the description in the show notes, depending on where you're watching this. And I will have links to those phone numbers and also to the website and all that stuff because it's fantastic what they're doing. Randy, let me just go ahead.
Hold on, move on. Kind of give people the process of how we take people in because we're by VOCA, VOCA.
Okay.
And so just the process is if you know where the shelter is and you walk up and knock on the door and you're in an urgent situation, we can help get the police here to get you to a safe. You can't just right on the street. You have to call the hotline and make a hotline call first.
Okay.
So, and that's for us, and that's for well. So somebody has to. Yeah, we can help get you safe. We're not going to turn you away totally if you just come and knock on the door of the shelter. Believe me, no, we want you to be as safe as possible, and we're going to help you do that, and we'll advocate for you with the authorities to do that. But a hotline call must be made. Now, that's a bit of some governmental red tape that we have to go through, but it's just a small step that we have to take in order to make you as safe as possible.
It's valuable information to have because that is different from what I experienced in the past. They did have walk-in. They were only staffed, off the top of my head, I think it was like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but they had the hotline was 24/7. Again, this is 25 years ago, 25 years. Things have changed drastically in that time. One of the things I kind of...
we're here 24/7. We're here on the hotline. We're here at the shelter 24/7. There is, all the way.
Yeah, the sound's breaking up just a little bit, just so you know. So, and I, just so the audience knows, we're having a little bit of internet connection. I'm not sure if it's on Randy's side or mine. I'm going to take the blame. Why not? But one of the things I wanted to touch on, and I think this is something that'll help a lot of guys, is as I experienced myself, but then with my group, is a lot of guys don't understand that they are actual victims. You touched on the physical violence, but that is not just domestic violence. A lot of guys think unless you're being physically beaten, and by the way, not just, they think you have to be beaten down, so to speak. That is domestic violence, don't get me wrong, but there are many more layers to the onion, if you will. Can you talk a little bit about that, Randy? Like, how would someone know that they could be a potential victim?
I mean, gaslighting is the big thing. That's more in the limelight nowadays, kind of making you feel like you're the problem in the situation of a relationship or whatever that may be. I mean, it can be, just, hey, how you doing? And you just get bombarded with, verbal abuse. There's emotional abuse too. If your partner or spouse or whoever is making you feel like you're nothing. I mean, you're this big all the time. That's domestic violence. Mm-hmm. It is. And we as guys, we're taught from when we're little tykes, just toughen up. Don't cry, toughen up. and all that. So a lot of times we don't necessarily recognize that type of physical or emotional abuse or verbal abuse and things of that nature, just from how, we're trained and all those brain in our minds from when we're really, really little. We also deal with human trafficking. There are men who are human trafficked out there too, not just young boys, but men as well. We have a human trafficking the here that helps with the rape coordinator that helps with that as well too. So I mean, in anything that, again, I can't emphasize this enough. Anything that you would think would be domestic violence for a woman, men go through as well.
It's exactly the same, as, in my opinion. I don't think there's any difference whatsoever. And
There's
there isn't, and it's something to society's really struggling with. I think is to understand that it isn't any different for men versus women. It should not be a gender issue. Just a quick side note on the human trafficking. I do a radio show every week. And it's probably about 2 months ago now, I had on our local sheriff's department to talk about human trafficking. And they did discuss, I live in a port city, so we're a very big area for Wilmington, North Carolina is where I live. We're a very big area for human trafficking. It's an unknown thing that, people don't talk about. And they were talking about boys are trafficked. They didn't have numbers, but it's pretty high number compared ratio to females. The other thing they mentioned was men. You mentioned that, and where they're trafficking them to, believe it or not, is to farms to do farm work. Which I didn't know that. It's everybody equates it to sex, but it's not.
Yeah, human trafficking is not just a sexual issue. Human trafficking you can take somebody can be taken out from their area and moved to do those kind of like indentured servants type of activity, or a sundry of all kinds of things. It's not just a sexual function when we talk about human trafficking. We have had one individual here that, he was at a shelter and then he was taken in by somebody who he thought was a friend, and just treated him worse than the dog, and made him shine his shoes, made him go out and get his own food for him. Like if he wanted to go out and wanted McDonald's that day or wanted Sonic that day or whatever it might be, hey, you're going to go over there and you're going to go pick up my food and you're going to bring it back to me, and by the way, I'm not getting you anything either. You're going to have to yourself. So and I don't have it covered here, that's why I'm you to go get me something. So it's not just sexual activity too. It runs the gamut of all kinds of things. So, I hope one thing that we're doing here today, Dan, is kind of opening people's minds up to what these really are.
And that's my objective with my podcast in general, but in specific to this particular area, is to raise awareness, because, as I said, a lot of guys don't realize that they are victims. And if we can just get the word out, make them understand, and if you aren't sure, reach out and ask, because you kind of mentioned it earlier, Randy. An argument is not necessarily domestic violence. That's it's an argument, right? But if it's a consistent thing, if you're being belittled consistently, if your wife says to you, "You're an idiot," one time, that's not domestic violence, all right? But if it's every single day,
more often than I'm not, but if it goes. The difference. If you're around people enough, the difference of if somebody's just kind of playing or being in jest or but trust your feelings and trust your emotions. That's one thing that we as guys are not taught to do, is to trust some of those things. Well, this doesn't feel right today. This is something that's kind of consistent, but it feels different today. It's just the feeling of it sometimes, especially when it comes to emotional abuse, or gaslighting and things like that. A lot of those things are a little bit harder to pick up on. And if you're not really trained, it's really tough to think that, well, I'm being a victim here. I'm being abused in this moment. Even if you say you have somebody who's around you today, let's say, and you're sitting there and you're, casual conversation like normal, you're cutting up, back and forth, just bantering and whatnot. And then all of a sudden something changes in their demeanor, something changes as how they are reacting to you. In that moment, you could be being abused,
Mm-hmm.
especially not your actions that change, it's theirs, So, and we think, well, what just happened? Did some, in the matter of just a couple of hours ago or just a couple of moments ago, you know, something drastic has changed, and you could be being abused in that moment and not necessarily realize that.
And I'm going to say this point blank: guys live in denial. I lived in denial for better part of 10 years in that relationship.
It's not different.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
We don't want to
hard.
admit it either.
Yeah,
There's
like my friends had no idea anything was going on. Family had no idea. And actually, when I was growing up, I was abused by my mother also. And so I always say my first marriage, I married my mother basically, because that's how I was raised. I thought that's the way it was. And um, looking back at it now and having gone through therapy and various things, I understand where I was, but I was in denial for a long time. And it wasn't till we separated and then I started reaching out and getting help that I had one particular person. He sat me down. He's like, "Dude, you were being violated and various other things," and that kind of opened my eyes. And that's what sprungboard me into becoming that person. Also, is to raise that awareness and say, you know what? If you and you kind of touched on this, if you think you might be being abused, there's a good chance you are. Kind of look into it a little bit. Reach out to someone. A trusted friend even can kind of give you that little feedback on it. And I highly encourage you to do that. You don't have to sit and take it. You don't.
don't,
Oh, I lost
don't
your sound again. Your sound's breaking
talk
up.
to your close
There you go.
friend. All right. Don't be afraid to talk to a close friend
Mm-hmm.
about, hey, I want to throw something at you. You might react to this. Am I overreacting to this? Could bounce that off of somebody else, but again, trust this person fully. It's not somebody you just have casual conversation with every now and again. This is somebody that, if you were flat tire 3 a.m. and this is a person you can call, kind of thing. That's the kind of trusted confidant you. And if you don't have that type of person, there's nothing wrong with reaching out with some of those mental health services that are out there, and just, hey, this most give you, and you don't have to pay anything for that. And I think I may be going through something here,
Mm-hmm.
and those are also some resources there. And even if I mean, get past this idea of, well, it's not happening or it won't happen to me, because if you really have that gut feeling that something different is happening, something is going on in the emotional type realm, it probably is. And so
Exactly.
trust that feeling and talk to, and don't be afraid to bounce it off. If it's a pastor, I mean, we're trained at times. We're not, a lot of us aren't counselors, but we are trained to pick up on different things and learn different, situations, and can kind of help advise you in that way. I will say, as a pastor, I'm not a licensed counselor. What I always tell people is, look, I'm not a licensed counselor. If you really feel like this is something you need to pursue, I want to encourage you to reach out to some mental health services to try to find a counselor, try to find a therapist, somebody that you can talk to about the one thing that people don't know too about pastors is we're mandatory reporters. And all of us here as advocates are mandatory reporters too. So, understand that if you tell something that we feel like we're required by law to contact an agency, whether it's Department of Human Services or even police department, local authorities, to report that. And for those that are advocates and those that are in positions like mine too, those can be anonymous type reports. So if you feel like, well, I don't want to get in trouble with my buddy, or I don't want to, break some sacred trust here with somebody, but there's something that they're telling you that, is very could be harmful to them, could be harmful to others, we have to tell those things, and there are anonymous ways to do that. And of course, you can give them as much information as you want about yourself when you're reporting that too. You don't It doesn't have to be anonymous, but there is that option there to help protect them. And there are laws in certain states too that protect those mandatory reporters as well, where even if you have a gut feeling about I really need to tell somebody that this person is in harm's way or this person is harming somebody. There's laws in certain states that protect. It's kind of like Good Samaritan laws, if you will,
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
that do know, and a mandatory reporter, the law is on your side, even if it's something minor and you don't think it means a hill of beans. It really could be a mountain, and you're just not able to see it. If you talk to somebody who's a bit more trained than you, they could better see that and better advise either you or that other person if we can get them in contact.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing as a peer counselor. My situation was pretty much identical to what I think you're dealing with. Is I'm not mental health counselor. I'm not I could always say shrink, right? But my goal was, or my job
Right.
was, to refer someone. If I felt, if they were using me as a sounding board, that's one thing. But if it was what I thought was a serious situation, they needed professional help, I had counselors that I could reach out to and get them the help. And much like you, I mean, we had a couple situations where I'm like, this guy is on the verge of harming himself, for example. And then I would either get law enforcement involved or someone that, I mean, one guy, he was in seriously bad shape. And we basically got him committed to a 3-day hold. I mean, the police came and they were fantastic with him. But by the way, I want to add on that, you should never feel anything negative if that's you. If you're going through something and you think you're worried about harming yourself, I'll just leave it at that so we don't get banned on YouTube for using the wrong terms. But if you're at that point, reach out for help. Go get it, and don't feel like there's something wrong with you for asking for that help. I'm not sure I phrased that the best way, but
Well,
that's critical.
as as part of our training, it's okay for somebody, you feel like you will be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
Has this hurt you in a way that you don't want to be alive? And it's okay to ask those questions, even though it may be uncomfortable to ask that type of question. And let me tell you something: if someone is willing, it's going to be way more uncomfortable to hear them say the word yes,
Mm-hmm.
more so than it is to hear the word. That word no, it comes with relief. It comes. Oh, thank you, but that word yes, talk about the knot in your gut, man. It seems to just tighten down even more, and that's the point. As a mandated reporter, I make sure they're safe. If I'm on the phone with them, then I have to contact somebody. And once I get done with that call, to say, hey, they are thinking about unaliving themselves or something of that nature, and they need immediate help. So, as uncomfortable as that may be, put yourself in their shoes. To hear it's very uncomfortable, but to feel that, and somebody who's actually gone through the thought process doing that, I'm glad there was somebody that I could talk to and that heard what I was saying in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, or else I would.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never had that thought. I can honestly say, because people have asked me, "Have you ever thought about unaliving yourself?" I can honestly say I never have. As bad as things got, it just didn't happen for me. I almost think I'm the exception, and I'm not saying it, to say I'm better than anyone else. No, I'm not. But it's interesting that what you're talking about, because I remember the first couple times that I was like, "Uh oh, we got a problem here." It's shocking, and people need to understand, when you're mandated to report, we're doing it from the goodness of our heart. We care about you. We're trying to help you. We're not trying to be negative towards you in any way. And I hope people can understand that. Randy, I kind of want to touch on something that we talked about a little while ago, which is, the way society views the male victim. And specifically, I want to start with, in general, how male victims are portrayed. One of the issues that I think causes it is, even when guys think, all right, I may be a victim, I might want to get help, they go on one of the shelter sites in their area. Almost always the pictures are all women. You never see a guy's picture on there. If you do, it's, portraying him as the perpetrator, not the victim. I know for a fact that has turned guys off because I've had people tell me that. Or sometimes you'll see it in the context of they'll have a gay couple, for example. That'll be their men. And to be honest with you, to the best of my knowledge, gay couples have the least amount of domestic violence within them. Not, it's not a contest, but two men together have, the statistics show, pretty much that's the quotes safest. What are your thoughts on how we can get that change, so to speak? Because I think that's a big reason why guys don't seek help is they go on these sites. Even the National Coalition of Domestic Violence, if you go on their website, it's all female. There was one gay couple, and there was one instance where they showed a guy, but it was in relation to he was a father, and they were talking about child abuse. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I can't state this anymore. Is that if it's happening to women, it's happening to men too. I mean, we said that once. We'll probably say it 100 times. Podcast there too. I need to throw that thought away. It's not happening to men and put it in the garbage because it is.
Right.
And you're right. It's not just gay couples. It's not just trans community. We've had several LGBTQ folks through at the Taylor House, but we've had way more hetero couples or heterosexual men that come through here than we have gay. So it's like cancer, man. It's not just. It doesn't matter what color, what identity, what orientation, what gender. Domestic violence hits everybody and every part of the spectrum, all the way across the board there. And we need to preach that message more and more and more and more and louder and louder and louder and louder until people start understanding that message. Is that it does not. It's just like cancer. I guess I used to work for the American Cancer Society and do a lot of advocacy there and fundraising. And they say that cancer does not discriminate. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate either.
No, it doesn't.
It's the same thing. And if I can out there for domestic violence, it's just like cancer. It is not exclusive to anybody. And so just continue to preach that message, preach it loud so people can hear. Say it louder for them folks in the back, brother. Yeah. Say it louder for them folks in the back. So,
yeah, unfortunately, as I speak out about it all the time, as I talked about earlier, I get attacked for it. It's, I've had on TikTok 3 accounts taken down prior to the one I have now. They do everything they can to silence me. Whoever they is, I'll leave that for another time. But it's interesting that, as we try and get the word out, people need to realize there are going to be those that are trying to silence it and prevent that word from getting out for whatever reason. I don't want to get into the politics of all that because some of it is political. But what I wanted to kind of go with next, Randy, is...
No, unfortunately, a lot...
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, unfortunately, a lot of it is political, too.
It is.
I mean, you can look now at the legislation that's going across the nation, not just in the state of Arkansas or not just in the southern states, but you can look at the legislation that's going through rampant really through the South, and it cuts through the middle of the country and kind of goes up north in Montana and Wyoming and those places too, that the very specific legislation going after certain people right now, and not to get on a tangent just for rights too, but they're being abused by our politicians. Mm-hmm. They're being domestically abused by our politicians right now, and the legislation that's going on out there, and not just in my state, but across the nation, it is harmful for people, and it's going to cause more problems. It's going to make my job more difficult in the future. And it's not just going to be select to the LGBTQ community. It's going to start filtering over into everybody, and it's going to larger there too, and it's going to make my job a bit. Well, fortunately enough, that's I've said I'm here to help. Right. So I mean, it's just there's going to be some effects from a lot of these things, and it is a lot of it is highly political.
And
to say that it's not.
I mean, it's having we talked off air before we went on, but for those that don't know, back about 20 years ago, I tried to get a shelter open for men in upstate New York. At the time, I lived in the Albany, New York area. There was no help there for guys. So, I would go to the New York State Legislature and lobby, and talked to both parties. Right at the time, New York was in the House was a Democratic majority, in the Senate was a Republican majority. What I found was interesting, though, is that those that supported what we were doing were pretty much dead even on party lines. Those that were opposed to it, guess what? Pretty much dead even on party lines. Uh, it was very interesting to see that. It's more about awareness than the political side of the spectrum that you're on, I feel. And unfortunately, we got nowhere. We couldn't get any help to get funding for men. But hopefully things are going to change on that. One of the things I kind of want to touch on a little bit too is what if you're a victim and you call in to say your hotline, or let's say any hotline, what can you kind of walk people through there's no typical, but let's call it a typical process of how you would help a victim and what they might see?
Sure. I mean, the first thing, like I mentioned earlier, the first thing that I'm going to ask you is, are you safe? You know, when you call our hotline there, I'm going to introduce myself, you introduce yourself, and it's funny. Some people will sit there and just, they'll vomit out information, and you just sit there and you listen as an advocate on. And once they take a breath, or once they pause long enough, you can go, okay, my name's Randy. I'm here to help you. Are you safe? That's the very first thing that I'm going to ask you. And if you're not, I need you to hang up with me. Remember this, or put it in your phone. Hang up with me and find somewhere to go safe. Either call 911, get yourself to a hospital, get yourself to a well-lit area. If you're in a spot where, your spouse or your partner, or whoever it might be, even if you're just living with friends, they've been abusive to you and you need to get out of that situation. If you're able to remove yourself from that dangerous situation and get to a safe spot, and you need to hang up the phone to do it, do it. You can always call me back. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's first and foremost. After that, I want to know what's going on. I want to know a little bit about what's going on with you, because unfortunately, we get a lot of phone calls here into our hotline. People are simply homeless. They're in transition. They've lost their home from one reason or another, or they're just moving from one part of the state to the next, or one state to this one, and moving to the area. Unfortunately, I can't help you if you're homeless. So you have to be a victim of domestic violence in order for us to take you in here at the Taylor House. And so there has to be some I hate to say evidence, because really we go off your word. Mm-hmm. Is what it is. And it is, we believe you. Here's one thing too. You call, we believe you. We believe what you're going through. We believe you are in a domestic situation. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to sit there and we're going to talk to you. I ask you to tell us a little bit about your story and what's going on with you in that moment. We are set up at Safe Haven and the Taylor House both to take children. So we're going to ask you, are there any children involved? And if we do accept you in, do we need to make arrangements for your children? So we are equipped to do that as well. And I'm going to ask you what your safety plan is. Moving forward. Do you have a bag? Can you get some of your things that you might need, with clothes and identification and important documents like a driver's license, social security card, birth certificate, if you have those. I mean, if you're like me and in my house, they're packed back in a box somewhere in the back of the closet or underneath the house, and those things you need to get to, So, if you have those things readily available and a getaway bag, it good. You don't, and you kind of feel like you're looking to get away from your circumstance, it's mindful to think about, well, what kind of documentation do I need? Mm-hmm. And especially if I'm moving across lines. We run into folks coming in from Texas here into Arkansas a lot, from Missouri and of course surrounding states, but we even have had people as far away from New York and Wyoming and Montana and Florida and Georgia and other places like that, Colorado, that have come in here, and they're starting over here. People we can relocate you here, house you here for a little while, and then kind of move you along to where you need to be or want to be in that aspect too. So, number one, are you safe? Tell me about, your situation, and let's talk about a safety plan and moving forward. Those are the three biggies that we really do here at the Taylor House.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I have always found with more so with men, but even with women, is they don't understand the type of help that you're going to get. And you kind of touched on a lot of that is, first and foremost, they are going to make sure you're safe. Second, they're going to figure out what your situation is and there's no one approach that's going to work for everybody. So everything, I always treated it, every situation's unique. And I would say, same as you did, right? Give me some information. Let me see how I can help you. My job at that point was to get them to the help, whatever that might be. But for guys especially, the thing that you don't understand is that there are places you can go, right? It may not be that you have a Taylor House available to you. Go ahead.
Right. But one thing, a gentleman was able to purchase a plane ticket from a state that was up north to Little Rock, Arkansas. We went down and picked him up because he was willing to get that plane ticket on and get out of that situation himself as well. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do a lot of mass transportation. We partner with groups like Families to Freedom and others that will help transport people via bus, or if they have some volunteer folks that will drive people to our shelter to do that too. So there are some secondary resources out there to help with transportation too. A lot of people don't know that there are, and even local churches too will help. And I just need a bus ticket to this place. I'm trying to get out. They have some benevolence funds there too with local churches or ministerial alliances, and even some banks will have kind of some community service type funds that they do. And you really need to plug your into some of those resources helps, and we help with that too. We'll give you suggestions when you call. Check with your local churches, check with this group, this civic group, Kiwanis clubs, Rotary clubs are good to help with some of those things as well, especially if it's an emergency situation too, and you're trying to get out of that as well. So, I also want to talk about those secondary resources to help. But Families to Freedom is a great organization, and they're based mainly out of Texas, that help get guys to us too. And then you can do a quick Google search Freedom and find them online. They transport. Matter of fact, we have a guy coming in this week that's being transported by that organization as well, and getting us here. And that's a free service, a free resource for you for transportation if you don't, because most people do not have a form of transportation to get away, especially if it's long distance too. Even local people around here sometimes not have any transportation. Unfortunately, Taylor House cannot go and get you, and unless we're picking you up from the airport or the bus stop or something of that nature. Even taxi services sometimes will help transport people too, and that's one of the big things about a lot of people that are in these situations is they don't have transportation. Right. But I want people to feel good that there are transportation services and resources out there to help.
Those are all key points. I'm not a religious person. I will tell you that up front. Saying that to a reverend, I know. But I will tell you, as far as resources, churches, I've always found are some of the best resources, especially for men. They help both men and women. But I've seen consistently that churches are one of the best resources to get you help. Transportation would be another form of that. So don't be afraid to reach out. I honestly don't know of a single church that I've ever dealt with that would have turned someone away, to be honest with you. So, go ahead.
Especially and especially if there's children involved too. If you're looking to get you and your children out of an emergent situation, I mean, I don't know a church that would say no at all.
I don't either.
None of them around here at all. either too. Now, I do want to touch down on some of the things that we can help with. Once we get you into the Taylor house, we can help you with court services if you need to do orders of protection, things of that nature. We don't necessarily see men putting orders of protection, especially on women or on other people. It's usually the other way around, but we do help with that. We have in-house that does that. We have some in-house therapeutic services. We partner up with third-party organizations that help with therapeutic services. We do groups all the time. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a rape crisis center here. We have a human trafficking organization that helps get you through and some therapeutic services and mental health services and get you connected with other people that have been through those experiences like you have, and to help you with coping with that. And everybody that comes through here, we don't take, unless you're a child with someone who is it, we don't take children by themselves. Children must be accompanied by their guardian, their parent, within our organization. We are set up to take children. And of course, the children are victims too, but the parent or the guardian has to be the one that is in the emergent situation in order for us to take them in. So I guess the easiest way to say, we service men who are 18 and up. Safe Haven services women who are 8.
Right.
The children are a part of that. We are equipped to take their children with them as well.
You bring up an interesting point there, Randy.
I need to make that.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, because one of the things I don't think a lot of people understand is the effect it has on children. But when you're trying to get help and you have children, guys in particular struggle with this, because I will be very blunt about it, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm going to be, which is most shelters, one, they won't help guys, but two, they definitely won't help guys with children. And the shelter I was affiliated way back then, even if a woman came in, and this is what actually kind of really I had to walk away from it, because there was instances of women I knew who were being abused that had boys. If their boy in the shelter I was affiliated with, if the boy was over 13, they would not take the mother in if the child was with them. Yeah, they were told, no, we can't help you. Again, 20 years ago, so things have changed. But they were very adamant that if you had a boy and he was over 13, you were not going to get, they would refer you out to other places, but they were not going to give you a bed or any of that stuff. We've got a girl, different story. The other story I talk about often is they had the where the shelter was. So where we were, you walked in, that wasn't the actual shelter. They had a bed place somewhere else. I wasn't allowed to know where it was. The people on the board of the directors who were male were not allowed to know where it was, because they were afraid we were going to go do something. It was, to this day, I think it's the most absurd thing going. But you guys do have beds for men, and you would accept a child, male, mother or father comes in to either place. You're going to allow that child to, if needed, to get that help, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not, just because you have children with you, and no matter their age, we're not going to turn you away from that at all. If you're a man and you have a daughter, you have a couple daughters, we're still going to take you in Taylor House. If you're a woman and you have boys, we're still going to take you in at Safe Haven. That does not disqualify you from services here with family violence prevention at all.
Yeah, and that's a key thing, especially for guys listening, is to understand that there are places that will help you. Because a lot of guys are like, I'm not going to go get help because I don't want to lose my children. Well, the children may be at risk too, because the unsaid thing often is if you're getting abused, a lot of times the children are too. And that goes both ways.
Absolutely. I want to tell you a quick story.
Go ahead.
And God love her. I still have respect for her. And I don't talk about this per se, because I talk a lot with folks because of how, again, and I'm in this business, but I still have some feelings myself. When I was a kid, my father got divorced from my mother, and we moved in with my stepdad. He got remarried, and we moved in. And one of the things that, and as far as what I now understand and realize as abuse was Dad wasn't allowed to put my pictures up or my sister's pictures up. It was just pictures of stepmother's kids and stepmother's family.
Mm.
I would not get my with the family's clothes and things of that nature. I would have to go and do my own or ask Dad for help in those situations too. So yeah, the kids and Dad didn't necessarily recognize that as being abusive in that time. And we're talking about, mid 80s and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. And I'm 45. And, so, when we moved in with that and those things started happening, as a small child, I knew I was being treated differently, but I didn't really know how to express that this feels bad, Dad,
Yep.
and things of that. So yeah, the kids definitely, definitely go through it as well.
Yeah, without question. And it's good to know that there are places that will allow the guys to come in and bring their children. And yeah, again, it's never.
And I will, Dan, when it comes to kids, unfortunately, and I don't want to deter anybody ever from calling and saying, "Hey, I need help." While the children are with us, they have to be what we are not babysitters as advocates here of our
Right.
shelters. So, if you do come here and you obtain employment, you also have to obtain some child care as well.
Right.
And we can get you connected too. Just unfortunately about the way we're funded, we're not considered a daycare too. So your children have to be under your guardianship or under the care of somebody you place them in, and we can't necessarily watch your children. Now, say all that, but while the kids are in the shelter, they're treated just like the family that's here and everybody else that's here, and we love on them, we play with them, we interact with them as well, just like we do the adults too. But if you go to work, you have to find somebody to watch your kids or let's help you get connected with some sort of a daycare or a voucher system that will get you some child care while you're away and working and trying to get some money to get you back on your feet.
Can you, Randy, just kind of brought up an interesting point. I kind of maybe some of the listeners would be interested to know what I don't know quite how to phrase this. What is life like in a shelter? I guess that's a horrible way to ask it, but I think it kind of gets the point. What would you say is a let's say a typical day in a shelter like?
I mean, I speak for my experience here at the Taylor House. This is the only shelter I've ever worked with or worked for. So I'm going to tell you specifically about my experience here. I'm one of, I want to say, 7 advocates. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 full-time advocates here, and we have a couple of 3 part-time advocates. So there's with the advocacy that you're going to get here in our shelter. I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and we work 12-hour shifts. And sometimes I'll come in and supplement on the weekends and help out. We have guys who work overnights for their 12-hour shifts. We have weekend guys, and we have our part-timers that kind of fill in the gaps through the week. Our house manager also takes a couple of shifts through the week as well. So you have consistency in advocacy, you have consistency in administration from our house manager and on up. And we are governed by, we are a nonprofit, so we're governed by a board of directors. Our board of directors aren't bound, kind of like the situation you mentioned earlier. They know where the shelter is. They're fully aware of where both shelters are and things of that. We do have a sense of confidentiality here in that we don't necessarily give out.
Nope. Your sound just completely dropped. Whoop. I've lost your sound completely.
How about that?
Now I got you. All right, let's pick back up. Go ahead.
we have a sense of confidentiality here, but we don't just freely give out the address to the shelters.
Right.
So there is confidentiality here, but it's not one of those that people around here don't know where the shelter is. People do know where the shelter is, but if especially if you're coming from out of state, we don't give that out.
Right.
People we do have a sense of confidentiality in that matter too. you're grown here. You are a grown man. You are a grown woman, because we take everybody who's 18 and up, and we work off what's the Arkansas Coalition of Domestic Violence, and I may be getting that name off, but they teach and preach the empowerment model. Mm-hmm. So when you come in, we want you to have kind of a safety plan and be thinking about that safety plan even once you get into the shelter and moving forward. We're not a permanent shelter, we're temporary shelter, but how long does it take you to get on your feet, especially if you're relocating in from a different part of the state or even another state at that? How long can you set a time frame on that? No. So what the coalition says, when I ask, well, how long does it take to get, from intake to, well, the day I'm leaving? As long as it takes, mm-hmm. is what we tell people. And you being a grown person, a grown man coming into the shelter, you are empowered. And we as advocates are going to empower you to do that at your pace. I have one individual that's been here it's going on 11 months. And wow. It's one of the longer stays we've had. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time.
But that individual's time, it's taken that long to get kind of out of the mindset of where they were and in their situation of, whatever it may have been, to be able to loosen up and to be comfortable enough to, okay, now I'm on track to start looking at exiting out of here. And that date's coming for that person. I'm so proud of from where they were when they first come in to where they are now is completely different. And a lot of positive progress has been taken. So, you're grown. We have a kitchen here. We have our bedrooms, bathrooms, and all that. We ask you to clean up your area. If you're going to go in the kitchen and make a meal, we have a full kitchen in there. And it's just set up just like a regular home would be. So, everything's not commercial. Residential type stuff, refrigerator, sinks in there. We ask you to clean up after yourself. If you're going to make a meal, we do a cool thing here at the Taylor House on Monday nights. It's family meal night, or myself or one of the other advocates. Yeah, and we'll cook a family meal and we'll gather around the dinner table, and sit down and talk as men and talk. We don't even have to talk about the crap you've been through that day. We can shoot the breeze about the weather. We could talk about sports. We could talk about whatever it may be. If they're interested in hobbies, I like bowling. I like doing this or whatever. Just whatever the case may be, we talk about it, and right. It kind of gives them a sense of family and connectiveness and unity in that moment over a meal. And a pastor like that because I'm a Christian pastor and Jesus did a lot of his ministry over meals, and I wanted to kind of install that. And we do everything from Mexican rice, and it's all big stuff because we've got 6 beds here, so, and a lot of times we're full, so there's a lot to cook for. This coming up Monday, we have a Filipino gentleman, and his mother comes to help volunteer. Wow. Who were former clients or former guests of the Taylor House, and they cook a Filipino meal. It's adobo with rice. It's Filipino egg rolls and all the fixed stuff. And so we do that on Monday just to have some sort of a semblance of family too. So the guys get up, they'll make coffee for that day, or if they want to make themselves breakfast, if they want to make it for the whole house, they're more than welcome to do that. We have some grant funding to help out with food in the house, to help with just kind of some basic needs and milk, bread, eggs, and those types of things. And again, that's grant funded. So anybody out there who's watching, if you'd like to donate to the Taylor House or Family Violence Prevention, please. That the bottom of that barrel, it comes up quick from time to time, especially with because guys can eat. I promise you.
Yes, they
guys can eat.
It's interesting. So, can we talk? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yep. Well, it's just the course of a different day. We're gonna, if you're relocating here, we're going to get you hooked up with resources. The Medicaid program here in Arkansas is very decent to help with health needs. And, some guys come in here with MS, some guys come in here with, the gamut of health issues as well, because maybe you've been in this abusive situation so long that you've neglected your own health. as well. So we'll get you hooked up with health resources here, medical resources, therapeutic resources, DHS, food stamps, HUD housing. We have connections for job opportunities, workforce opportunities as well, and we advocate for everybody that comes in here. And again, it's really the empowerment model is doing that all on your own time. Now, if somebody wants to come in here and they feel like they want to be able to do that all on their own, more than welcome to as well. The advocates are here to help them along. Otherwise, we're just kind of hanging out or talking with one of the other guests that are here or doing whatever, or maybe fixing the door frame, or we've got something that's crooked on one of the walls we'll fix too, or it's everything that you would do in your own home. Typically we do here too. It's just we're a safe space for those persons that are in the situation that they're in.
One of the things you're talking about, and I think is very important for guys to realize, is the goal is to get you back on your feet as best they can. That's their job. You've got to take some action on your own.
It's not as we can. It's the best we can. I like how you put that. Yeah. As best as we can.
As best you can.
Because there is no time limit for you to be able to do. Some people we're talking about extreme trauma. They've been beaten by their partner or by their spouse so much that they've had to have surgery in here. And we've had 2 individuals within the last 6 months that have had that specific experience, that it was so volatile that their injuries, they had to have surgery before they could come in here. So when they initially get in here, they're out of surgery, maybe a week or a couple weeks out of surgery. And so we have to get them connected to health resources here as far as medical and orthopedic type stuff, and to get them checked up, and then physical therapy type resources and doing that. So the process of them here to where they're even thinking about sitting or even thinking about getting a job could be several weeks to a couple of months before they even start that process of it. So there is that time. I like how you put that. We do it the best we can. It's not as fast as we can.
Right.
Yes, we'd like to get people out in a timely manner, but there is no set time for that.
Right. It's about getting people the help they need in the best way possible. And that's why I said earlier, there's no cut and dried formula to follow. Every situation's unique, and should be treated as unique. If I could kind of just shift gears a little bit here, Randy, because one of the things that I talk about a lot, and as I've talked about here even, is getting more shelters open for men. I have to ask you, how the hell did you pull it off? You guys pulled it off, because in New York State, I tried for 3 years. There was a group of us. We put together a business plan. We had it all lined up, but we could not get funding. From either the legislature. We had some private funding that was going to help. That was okay, but there wasn't a lot of support out there. So there are only 2 shelters. There's Taylor House, and then there's, forgive me if I get the name wrong, what's the one in Dallas? What's the name of it? Do you know? I always forget. Is it Family Place?
To be honest with you, I don't know the name of it.
I think it's Family Place. Forgive me on that. But those are the only 2.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that myself. But those are the only 2 shelters. How can we, let's say someone is listening to this and say, geez, I want to get a shelter open for men in my state, whatever, doesn't really matter. How can they, 1, get the process started, and 2, can you kind of talk about even moving forward how you got funding and all that stuff? Because I think it's something that people should hear about.
Well, family violence prevention, it escapes me the year that they actually got started as a women's domestic violence organization. So, the need there was for women, and that's where it started. In, I want to say 2015 is when the Taylor House actually started operation. We had a generous family here in our area that had a house and was looking to make a donation. So we were kind of blessed in the sense that they donated the house and the property for this specific reason to family violence prevention. Now, I'm not sure much of the history of that. Did we look at a second, women's shelter? But at that time, because we're a nonprofit, we're governed under a board of directors, that they saw a need out there that said, hey, we need to do this for men as well. And we've been with this property now, and we can go in and we can outfit it for specifically the needs of men, since we already service women as well. So, our situation, Dan, is a bit unique in that is where we didn't have to really start from the ground up for our men's shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So we're federally funded. VOCA, what we call VOCA, and we're also funded statewide. Our guidelines are backed by the Arkansas Coalition of Domestic Violence. And again, I may be getting that organization incorrect right off the top of my head there, but they help us with our state guidelines, and they understand all of the federal requirements too, because since we are federally funded, we first have to meet federal mandates as well, and then the state's mandates are secondary to that as well. And I'm gonna tell you this, being that there's only 2 dedicated specifically for men, we know the need is out. I mean, we get calls every day, and we only have 6 beds here at the Taylor House currently. And we're trying to, there is a full basement that's underneath the entirety of the house we're in, but it's not finished out. And right now we're doing some fundraising and trying to get that secured up to where we can actually finish it out so we can put more beds down there, because the need is great. If I would say somebody out there, number one, understand what your federal regulations are and your state regulations are on something, whatever your shelter needs is. If you want to service anything like that, develop your nonprofit board. I mean, do all those things you have to do for sure you're going to be within the regulations. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of regulations and guidelines out there that you have to follow. You may not be there. So and I would assume that just like here in Arkansas, there's probably a coalition or an organization in each state that deals with these sorts of things. And so you can reach out locally and see what those regulations are. And then, being a nonprofit, we do fundraisers all the time. I mean, whether it's throwing one of our big ones is called Karaoke for a Cause. And we throw a big karaoke party once.
I love that.
It's a big event. It's just a great time to come and celebrate what it is that we do, and that's backed totally by the board. The board goes out and does all of that, and us advocates were asked to join in and help from time to time. But that's all a big push from the board. So if you got friends, 4 or 5 friends or whatever that really has a heart for men domestic violence situations, I mean, start doing your research today. The big cost is going to be property, finding a place to house people. And then you have to pay people to be there, and with property, there comes utility costs and insurance costs and, all of those sorts of things. So, it would behoove you to do your research on what all that is. And I'm going to tell you, it can be overwhelming just thinking, because with every little thing comes the cost attached to that, right?
Yes,
so everything. And that can get bigger and bigger and make your eyes go, oh my gosh, is it really worth it? Should we do this? But yet, the need is great, and it is absolutely worth it. This is some of the, and I've been a pastor for several years now, but this is some of the most meaningful work that I have ever done. Not only in a secular position, but also in my ministry life as well. Need is great, and it's absolutely worth it to do that. So, if somebody's asking, make sure you're up on your regulations and fundraise. There's grants out there that are specifically for this. And because we are a men's shelter, they're specifically just a men's shelter. There are typically some more monies out there than there would be for a women's shelter.
Really?
We kind of...
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I have to tell you, you stunned me with that one.
Well, I don't remember which one it is, but I want to think, I'd say it was one of the food grants that we got just last year that our men's grant was fully funded and our women's grant was like 75, 80 on that. Because we service men, we got fully funded. So there are some, because it's so rare, there are opportunities out there for grant funding that could help you, especially if you're just going to focus on a men's shelter.
And that's, again, I have it in the back of my mind to get restarted on that, so to speak, even though I'm in a different state, to kind of talk about some of the stuff that Randy's talking about. You do need to have your ducks in a row. We put together, we call it our business plan, because you do have to run it. It's a nonprofit. You have to follow the regulations, 501(c) or whatever. You've got to have a board of directors. It's a daunting task. I think you kind of said that, but you also said, in the end, is it worth it? Yes, it is, because you are literally changing people's lives. And I will say that I am jumping back into the fray on that. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's
that's cool. I want to encourage you to do that. I know you're discouraged in New York, a bunch of, brick wall and roadblocks there. And it hasn't been here in Arkansas either. Mm-hmm. One of the big things people will say in your community is, yeah, that's a great idea. Just don't put it next to me.
Yeah, we heard that. Yeah. We heard the same thing. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So we found some property that's kind of secluded, if you will, and not necessarily on the beaten path. And you don't necessarily want to be on the beaten path. You don't want to be downtown, on Main Street at times, just because of the exposure and whatnot. So, if you can find those properties and find those places where people will accept it, get the community behind it. I mean, do as much advocacy for the cause as you can, and I mean, as many partners as you can get on board, and people, I mean, especially churches too. If you can get churches to back you, and your religious community to back you too, if you have a religious community, and they make a lot of the decisions in town, because a lot of times churches are still making some of those decisions in town that you might not think that they're making decisions on. They really are. That's a good community to get you back. They're already in the mindset of one service, and they're already in the mindset of being community organized and oriented. That's just another resource that you can tap into that can help you for the cause.
Very important information there. So the next thing we're getting close to the end, but one of the things I wanted to kind of get your input on is, as an average person, you're an advocate, I'm an advocate, but the average Joe, so to speak, out there, how can they help get the word out? How can they help raise awareness? What are the things that we can do to come together and help men in general? What would be your suggestions?
Talk about it. Just simply talk about it. It's like when we talk about people who want to possibly harm themselves from time to time. I had a superintendent of schools when we had a couple of students who did harm themselves say, well, we don't need to talk about this because it's going to glorify it. And we don't want to come on board with that. If we are talking about these things, it might make somebody go, wait a minute. Hey, here's somebody safe to talk to. If they could become a resource, or they could become an advocate to help. So I would say, don't be afraid to talk about it, especially for men. If you really feel like you're in one of those situations, find that friend of yours and talk about it and say, hey, I need you to listen. Like, specifically, I need you to listen to this. I think I'm going through something here, or I know I'm going through something here. And don't be afraid to just simply talk about it. We don't talk about this stuff enough, Dan. So it's in the backs of people's, not even in their minds at all. And especially if you haven't been through, it's like my dad, he didn't recognize what was going on with me and my stepmom. You may not recognize, we've talked several times on this conversation alone, may not even recognize that this activity is abuse. Exactly. So the more we talk about it, the better off we're going to be. And don't be afraid to scream loud from the mountaintops. Don't be afraid, to go to your city council and talk. Hey, we have an issue here. Go to your quorum court in the county, or go to whoever you need to talk to. Go to your pastor, go to your churches and talk about these things, and go to the firehouse and talk about these things. I promise you that firefighters and police officers and EMT workers understand
they do.
Domestic violence, what's going on out there, and they deal with it more than they would like to admit. So if you can get in there and talk to them and allow them to help be advocates for what's going on with you, we have a great relationship with our local authorities on all of those services as well, that send people our way, and some people, yes, some people we cannot, but just if I'm going to put it in one simple thing, don't be afraid to talk about it, and go and talk about it.
You stole every word I would have said, just so you know. And that's what I talk about all the time is, guys, if you're listening to this. All right, so we're back. So just so you know, when Randy is taking phone calls, I do stop the recording and he mutes himself, because we do want to respect the privacy of anyone who is calling into the shelter there. So just kind of put my thoughts on what. Go ahead.
Say something about that quick. Sorry, Dan. When it comes to confidentiality, we share the important things with our advocates, that pass on information like, this person is doing this today, this person is at work today, this person looked at these things, they talked to HUD today, they talked to DHS, but when it comes to the intimate details of a lot of what I do as an advocate is I just sit and listen. I sit and listen to, if you want to tell me your story, if you want to tell me your experiences, and kind of help you unpack that somewhat, and even in our therapeutic services, but we don't share those intimate details with other advocates. We don't share those intimate details with directors or even our house managers and things of that nature. So there is a sense of sacred reality, even amongst those in the house. Now, being a grown person, if you want to share those things with the other people in the house and the other advocates, you're more than welcome to do that. It's just, we don't do that.
Right. It's not our place as advocates to share your information. We want to encourage you to share your information to the world. The more you talk about your story, the more people are going to realize, hey, maybe that applies to me. A couple things to kind of juxtaposition on what you were talking about earlier is, one, reach out to your local governments and talk to them about the issue. That's something that you can do that can actually have a tremendous effect. Another one, and I'll be honest with you, you're going to get resistance to it, but is reach out to the media in your area. Sometimes you'll get resistance, but I've also, in the past, I've reached out to local TV and they've interviewed me and I talked about my story. This is years ago. There are ones out there. Randy worked in radio, so he knows where I'm gonna go with this probably, but they love a good story. Right? So if you can come at them with a good story, they will jump all over it. And it's not about making you famous or anything like that. It's getting the word out, right? So that's ways that you can really help out and help, even if you're not a victim, if you can speak out about it, you can help literally millions of guys out there. The more we talk about it, the less the stigma will be. I give credit to the women's groups. They talked about it. This is 40, 50 years ago. They raised awareness of the issue, and ultimately it put the pressure on to the appropriate people to do something about it. Guys are starting to do that. We need to do more of that. If we can do nothing else, whether you're a victim or not, you speaking out can literally change lives. So I highly encourage you to do that. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, as much as you talk about it, and as much as you want to talk about it, talk about it. Even if you don't want to talk about it, guess what?
Talk about it.
Because people aren't talking. It's things like this that I appreciate so much, that you take the time to do this. But you have a connection to it. You have a personal experience with it. Mm-hmm. Not every guy out there does, and they still have that thing in the back of their mind as if, well, don't ask, don't tell. It ain't, if it didn't happen to me, it ain't happening to nobody. But it is. So don't be afraid. If your buddy I don't care if he's your drinking buddy, your fishing buddy, or your card buddy, or just riding around town listening to music, spitting chew out of your mouth, buddy. Whatever kind of buddy you have, if he has some sort of sudden change in his attitude or the way he's expressing or reacting to things, don't be afraid of, hey man, are you okay today?
Mm-hmm.
Or is everything going okay? How are, and even if there's not a change that you recognize on there, don't be afraid to ask your guy friends, are you okay today?
Exactly.
Are you okay today?
Exactly.
Sometimes they're going, man, no, I'm not. I'm just not okay today. And just be that ear to listen as well. And you're being an advocate then in that capacity as well. And you're just hanging out with your buddy, asking him how he is,
The more
and I'm kind of a stranger to my brothers, and I'll message them every now and then because we don't talk very often. There's pretty big age gap between me and my next sibling, but I'll just reach out to them every now and then, have to talk to them in a few months, and go, hey bub, how are you doing today? Are you okay?
mm-hmm.
Reach out to your family members as well, friends. Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it.
As guys, the biggest mistake we make, and whether it's domestic violence or I think in general, is we internalize everything. We don't let it out. And I get that we're worried about the stigma. I talk about all the time. Guys won't open up to their wives or whatever because they're worried it's going to get blowback on them. And yeah, okay, it happens. But we still have to be willing to speak up. It's not weakness to speak up. It's strength to speak up. One of the things I always say is it takes more strength to speak
Right.
up than it does to stay silent. And like I said, I get viciously attacked sometimes because I speak up. I don't care, because if I change one life, then my mission's accomplished. And you can have that kind of effect, if anybody's listening to this, is if whether you're a victim or not, if you can reach out and say, hey, brother, are you doing all right? And if they do come to you, just listen to them. I will tell you, one of the most rewarding things to me, and what helped me with my recovery from what I went through more than anything else, was running that group. Because one, I learned it wasn't just me, right? I mean, there were, average meeting, we had 10 to 15 guys. So stories are very similar usually, not always, but learning that, geez, it wasn't just me. And then being able to express it. I would talk about my story and you just get it out. You process it, for lack of a better term. That can have so much of a positive effect on you and the people around you. So again, I'm mirroring everything Randy's saying. It is the most critical thing we can do to help ourselves and each other, guys, is to say, are you okay, brother? Or, no, I'm not okay. Can you listen to me?
Here's that you're Here's something too that you just might realize is that, hey, my best friend might be going through the same thing I'm going through. And now I have somebody that I can not just lean on, but I can go to share those experiences with as well, and how to work through those things together. And hey, look, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, are you okay? You know, it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
if we talk about this, we're going to find that we're not alone. We are not alone. And this is way more common. Unfortunately, domestic violence issues, even in men, are way more common than we actually realize. We're just not talking about it.
Right. It's a silent epidemic is sometimes how I refer to it. In fact, I wrote an article a few years back, and that was the title they used in the paper. They called it domestic violence against men, the silent epidemic. And I went, that editor was a genius. I didn't come up with it. That editor did. So, all right, Randy, before we close down, could you share the information on how people can reach out to Taylor House again, and other resources that may be available that you have?
Absolutely. Our direct hotline number into the house here, and I'm looking up on my cheat sheet here. It's 870-8024. That's 870-5024. If you happen to find itself where it's toll-free hotline. That toll-free hotline, and most of these hotlines are manned 24/7, 365. 800 894 8821. 800 894 8821. Either one of those numbers will get you to either, well, the first number I gave you will get you directly to Taylor House. The 800 number could get you either to Safe Haven or Taylor House, and we're both under the Family Violence Prevention umbrella here in our area, and we can get you to the correct place where you need to be. Even women, if you want to call the Taylor House hotline and you find yourself in a situation that you need some assistance, we'll get you to Safe Haven. We'll get you to our advocates that are over there as well at that shelter, and specifically, and get you the help you need. We have therapeutic services, mental health services. We do group services. We have a rape crisis center here. We have a human trafficking coordinator for people that deal with those specific instances here as well. We do all kinds of group therapy, and best of all, we have a safe place that you can go to remove yourself from whatever that emergent situation in when it comes to domestic violence, and a place where you can breathe, a place where you can finally get some rest, and a place where you can get back on your feet, because we'll connect you with DHS to get food stamps, to get medical insurance, get you set up with some local providers here, and even get you set up with job. There's some workforce training and workforce opportunities that we have partnered with in our area too, to get you there. Or if you're looking to find that safe space to breathe, and you want to move on eventually to somewhere else that's not here, we can help you with that too. So just be mindful that we are here to help at the Taylor House, specifically for men. Safe Haven is our women's facility too, and don't be afraid to call if like you're in a domestic violence situation. It doesn't have to be physical. You can be going through verbal, you can be going through emotional abuse, so you can be going through financial abuse. Somebody could be just using you to get by. Those things are, they could be, attacking onto you just to utilize your resources, and there are abuse situation. We can help with those situations as well here at the Taylor House.
Randy, thank you so much for sharing all that information. I will put links below to the Taylor House website. And I will also put the phone numbers below in the show notes, depending on where you're watching this. I will have that all there. So if, sometimes people are listening, they can't jot the numbers down, they'll be there for you. I'll also have them on the screen, so you can always go back and look at them. Randy, again, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. The more we can get this word out and make guys realize there is help out for them. They don't have to go it alone. And there are tremendous people such as Randy who are there to help you. Randy, any closing thoughts before we bring it into it?
When it comes to men's domestic violence, the stigma is out there. We erase the stigma that men do not get caught up in domestic violence issues as victims, because we do. We do. I can't tell you that enough. When it comes to domestic violence issues for men, just like women, it's like cancer. It does not discriminate, but absolutely understand there is help out there. And the Taylor House is one place where you can find help. You can find solace. If you're looking to relocate, we can relocate you. We can get you here, let you take a breath for a moment, and help you get back on your feet to do that. So if you think that there's not help out there, brother, there is help out there. The Taylor House is just one of those that you can go to help.
Randy, again, thank you so much for coming on. And down the road, I'd like to have you back on and talk about it some more, because this is near and dear to my heart, both as a victim, as an advocate, as a man. And just to be clear, I support female victims every bit as much as I do men, and I know Randy does as well. Neither of us view it as a gender issue. It is not a gender issue. It never should have been portrayed that way. It is.
So Dan, thank you for what you do. I mean, you are a great boy. What happens to men out there. I know you have that personal experience yourself, but and there's a lot of guys out there that don't too, that doesn't necessarily talk about these things. And we've said it through the whole podcast here, but I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much for having me on and to talk about the Taylor House and just get the word out about the services that we do provide and the help that we can provide. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy. All right, on that note, because I have no words to say after that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again to Randy from Taylor House for joining me. And guys, as both of us said, if you even think it's a remote possibility, reach out for help because you deserve it. And it is nothing to be ashamed of. I have lived through it. I can tell you it wasn't until I reached out for help that things changed in my life. And yes, it was difficult. I'm not going to tell you it was easy for me, but it was the best thing I ever did. So thank you for watching the podcast. Hey, if you've watched this far, you must have liked what you were hearing. Maybe it resonated with you. Do me a favor, give me a like. Please share this because as Randy and I both talked about, we want to get the word out. The more this gets shared, the more the word gets out, the more men we can help. And hey, if you're not already a subscriber, subscribe to the channel. Till next time, this is Dan from Men Need to Be Heard. You have an awesome day.